Hello, Internet! Welcome to episode 278 of the Assorted Calibers podcast, the secular podcast. There's a little bit for everyone. I'm Weer'd, and with me, as always, she's wonderful, she's amazing, she's had a rough night, is the greatest hostess in the entire world. Is there something bigger than the universe? There's nothing bigger than the universe. Aaron Paulette! How you doing, Aaron?
Well, I suppose you could have said multiverse. But then you start comparing me to Infinity and...
Aaron, Infinity is... I would not dare to compare you to something as inferior as Infinity.
How am I doing? I'm tired. I'm not going to go into detail because it's a long story that takes tens of minutes to recount, and if you want the details, just listen on the next blooper reel and you'll know everything. But the short version is that last night I had to take our remaining dog to a 24-hour vet, and it ended up being emergency surgery for the dog. And we were there, I think we left sometime between 1 and 1:30. I'm a night owl, but, I usually go to bed at about 2, and I'd been tired all that day, and then, of course, all the stress of, is our dog going to be all right? And then Mom is freaking out. And so, yeah, I feel like a threadbare washcloth that has been aggressively wrung out and then hung on a line to air dry. So, oh, yes, I should probably reassure our listeners that as of right now, the dog is okay. She got through the surgery, and she seems to be, well, she's not exactly her normal self because she's going to be like 14 at the end of the month. Not a young dog, doesn't really bounce back from surgery, but she's doing better than I thought she would be. She's walking, had to have her one of her rear legs operated on, have a tumor excised, and she's walking on it. I'm sure she doesn't feel good, but she doesn't seem like she's in actual pain. She seems more irritated by dealing with the surgical cone around her face, and I'll have a little bit better idea in the next few days, but I'm very cynical, and even I think this looks really good, and she's going to be okay. So, it was a really stressful 24 hours, and when we're done with this podcast, I am just going to crash into bed. So that's how I'm doing.
Yeah, and I will say as practically a veterinarian. I'm a veterinary technologist, and I have dealt quite a bit with animal tumors and all that. It does sound like it's a very, very good prognosis, and it sounds like the doctors had a stroke of luck in getting everything cleaned up and gone through. I look forward to hearing some of the follow-ups when you're not quite as fried and given that it was an emergency room visit. I will say one thing, because I want this to go out for as a general rule. What you mentioned that you have an emergency. Of course, you are Miss Blue Collar Prepping. You have an emergency room bag. Can you just give just a brief elevator speech on that, because that just sounded amazing?
Sure, and I wrote a post on it, and I'll see if I can dig it up for the show notes. But it started. Gosh, I don't even really remember how many years ago, but I mentioned that my father had Parkinson's and was frequently falling, couldn't get up, things like that. And so sometime in the late 20-teens, it was one of those things where it seemed like one of my parents, usually my father, was going to an emergency room about once a month. And so I created an emergency room bag, a very specialized form of a bug out bag, in order to make me comfortable as I was waiting in an emergency room. Because I think, as everyone knows, emergency rooms are just not very pleasant, and they're uncomfortable, and they got harsh lighting. And so I crafted this bag over several sessions. And I mean, I wouldn't say that it's perfect, but it's got all sorts of stuff, and I can't quite find it. I'll have to find it after the podcast. But what do I have in it? Okay, so I have a sweat jacket, because a lot of times you're sitting under a vent and it's blowing on you when you're cold. I have an extra hat, because I really don't like fluorescent lights that are shining right into my eyes, and emergency rooms are famous for that sort of thing. So I've got something to shield my eyes and protect me from the headache. I have my tablet computer, just in case I could maybe get some work done. I have a battery to charge my phone or the computer in case I'm nowhere near an outlet. I have a small bag of toiletries just in case I have to, like, spend the night. So it's got, like, my medications and my nasal spray and, emergency deodorant, emergency toothpaste. It can be used for, I have to spend the night at a friend's house. I have, in the side pockets, I've got a bottle of water and a bottle of Gatorade and a couple of granola bars just for snacks, because, you might be sitting in an ER room missing a meal. And I'm probably missing something important, but I think I've hit the highlights. Oh, yes. I have an inflatable cushion in case I'm sitting on a very uncomfortable chair. And I made use of the cushion for me last night, and I used the hat, and I gave the sweat jacket to Mom because she was cold. And yeah, that's all I can think of at the moment. I know that there are more.
I mean,
but
it's such a great idea. I should kind of think about that as well, just because the emergency rooms suck, and sometimes it's a long time by nature of emergency, you're not planning to go there, and so having something you can quickly grab is an absolute, amazing. It's brilliant, and I'm so glad it worked out for you.
Mm-hmm. There it is. Finally found it. I'll be sure to put that in the show notes. It's titled the ER bag.
Excellent. Oh, well, I mean, and you were asking me how I've been, and I interrupted you. But yeah, it's for comparatively uneventful. I will just say that my family ran out of all the breads today, and so as the tireless baker that I am, between prepping for the show and I cut an ACP blooper reel like just before sending my daughter to bed, I've made so much bread. So much bread. I mean, we had a big pile of spotty bananas, so had to make banana bread, and we were out of English muffins, so had to make those. We were out of sandwich bread, had to make those, and then we had chili for dinner, and you can't have chili without cornbread. I mean, it's the law. So that's I've just been running around mostly from just overbooking myself, going, I could totally get all this done, and I can, but now I'm tired.
Mm-hmm.
But thankfully now we're doing a show, so this is where I recharge, because I'm an extrovert and I'm crazy. And shall we tell you, there's really just one major news story to talk about, and I am going to be very, very cautious as not to be like, extra like doomsayer, panicking, and all of that.
Really? You're Pollyanna optimist.
Yes.
When have you ever been a doomsayer? I
mean, I haven't, but I've definitely seen some people posting on this, like, oh my God, this is like the biggest threat to humanity, entirely, and all that. And don't think it is. This is so a new assault weapons ban has been has been put forward. It was sent out by Martin Heinrich of New Mexico, Angus King of Maine. I will note that Angus King was the first politician that I ever learned to dislike, and that was back when I considered myself a Democrat. So he has my bipartisan distaste because he was an absolutely, completely ineffectual governor that talked a really big talk and that did nothing. And okay, I thought there was
and
one
Mark
other.
Kelly.
Yeah. Mark Kelly and Michael Bennett of Mark Kelly, of course, of Arizona, and of course of the Giffords anti-gun lobbying group that is essentially been heavily funded by Michael Bloomberg, and Michael Bennett of Colorado. So
just to make it clear to our listeners who may have missed this, may not have been following, this is the GOSAFE Act, the Gas-Operated Semi-Automatic Firearms Exclusion Act. And yeah, it really does read like the Assault Weapon Ban 2.0 with a very critical difference, whereas AWB 1.0 excluded guns either by evil feature or by specific model name. GOSAFE, which isn't safe and probably won't go anywhere, basically just wants to repeal all semi-automatic weapons, to be perfectly honest. The way that they do this, all right, the impression I have, and the impression I got from watching Ian McCallum of Forgotten Weapons talk about it on a YouTube short, is it seems like they tried to specifically ban assault weapons like AR-15s and AK patterns, but the way they phrased it, it essentially outlaws anything semi-auto. Because, and I'm reading an article here from the Reload, it defines the gas-operated semi-automatic firearms that would be prohibited under the bill as, quote, any firearm that harnesses or traps a portion of the high-pressure gas from a fired cartridge to cycle the action, end quote. So, yeah, that not only excludes piston and direct impingement, but, blowback, recoil-operated, essentially anything that is semi-auto. The one thing that I found very interesting, well, two, actually, there are carve-outs. It does exempt recoil-operated handguns, but I don't trust that, to be perfectly honest. It has a carve-out for semi-auto shotguns, and I think that'll last exactly long enough until somebody uses that in a crime somewhere, and then that's going to be amended. And of course, this assumes this law will pass, and I don't think it will, but we'll talk about that in a moment. The one thing that I found really very interesting here, and this is where I'm going to admit my ignorance of firearm minutia and ask Weer'd about it, is that another thing that is exempted is any handgun with a permanently fixed magazine of 15 rounds or less. And I just have to wonder, are broom handle Mausers that common? I have honestly never heard of any fixed magazine handgun of 15 rounds. Does such a thing even exist?
Oh, that is a very, very deep pull, and I don't even know off the top of my head the magazine capacity of the broom handle Mauser. I'm on Wikipedia right now, and
I mean, I want to say 10, but
yes, yep, 10 rounds for the standard fixed magazine. There were the Schnellfires that had the detachable magazine, but that was detachable. And
it's just such a really, really strange carve out that I wonder what kind of niche firearm they had in mind. Or maybe they just didn't know what they were talking about.
I mean, given that they said gas operated, and let's see, I had where did I put it? There it is. So So they say the term gas operated with this is the exact text of the bill here that's in the show notes. Any firearm that harnesses traps a portion of the gas from the cycle of the action using a long stroke piston, and it describes a long stroke piston. A short stroke piston describes a short stroke piston. Let's see. System that traps gas from the barrel, a chamber to directly strike or impinge on the bolt or bolt carrier. And so, yeah, that is what we know as gas operated. But then D, a hybrid system that combines elements of the system described in subparagraph C with a system described. Okay, so it's saying, yeah, if you mix and match them somehow, that still counts. E, a blowback operated system that directly uses expanded gases to ignited propellants acting on the cartridge to drive the breech block or breech bolt rearward. So direct blowback is there, and then recoil operated system. So literally anything. Like if it is using any sort of recoil action or gas operation, this counts. So it's one of those, like, they literally called it the gas operated I can't even remember all the
semi-auto firearm exclusion.
Yes, firearm exclusion act. They literally, it's a backronym. They went, how can we make a clever sounding thing? We want this to sound catchy. And literally that was like their peak. That was their number one priority. Not making people safe, not coming up with a law people are going to support, not with something that's sensibly written. It is so dumb and makes like no sense. And it's got, dumb carve out. So again, when you mentioned that, like the fixed magazine, there's a bunch of like World War I era guns, such as the Brumhander Mauser, the Rothsteier M1907, what's the feed system on that? That was a fixed, that was a 10-round magazine as well. So again, 10-round magazine. And then more recently, the Grendel, so pre-Keltec, the Grendel P11, I believe it was. That one used an 11-round fixed magazine for a 380, very, very, very crappy looking pistol. The number of clip-fed fixed magazine pistols is so small as enough to be odd trivia, hence why you're asking me, because I'm a dork about such things. This was one of those, honestly, I think either they just weren't thinking, or they were thinking on the fact that, all right, we're willing to allow people to come up with a fixed magazine Glock so long as but we're also going to say, no, you can't have a fixed magazine Glock 17 or a fixed magazine, Glock 17 with a 30-round mag, and you just got to load it through the top. I think that's as best I could come up with them thinking.
I mean, part of me wants to say that one of the writers of the bill has a really niche firearm and wants to keep it, but it seems like someone who has that level of gun enthusiasm would not be in favor of this bill.
Yeah, I mean, there's a potential, but I legit cannot think of a single fixed round magazine handgun that holds more than 10 rounds. I mean, I just looked up the two that I could think of that would hold close to that. They're both 10-round mags. So I have no idea.
So with legislation this dumb, it shouldn't be a surprise to anyone that Michael Bloomberg has his fingerprints all over this. Now, I'm not specifically saying that he wrote it. I'm not saying that he didn't. But what I am saying is that Bloomberg and the various subsidiaries that he owns have come out in favor of this law.
Of course they have. I have long since concluded that if you are anti-gun, if at any point a gun owner will look at a law and go, oh, that's awful, I don't like that, they will endorse it and support it. I mean, it's just, again, the I constantly bring up the 7-day waiting period, which occasionally raises its head, and it is often deemed a cooling off period. It was never a cooling off period. The 7-day waiting period was simply to allow plenty of time for the 4473 to make its way to Virginia for the FBI to run it through the background check system and then mail back a response before the NICS system was created. And that's the only reason why it existed. And then when the NICS system was created, a bunch of anti-gun states went, oh, and the pro-gun people went, oh, good. Now we don't have to wait anymore because we can process this stuff instantly. Hooray. And still accomplish the same amount. It's not like, honestly speaking, the NICS system is better than the mail system because stuff can get lost in the mail. All sorts of problems can happen. The NICS system is considerably more robust than the post mail system that was used before that. But the anti-gun group said, well, we can't have the pro-gun people be happy, so we'll keep it and we'll just call it a cooling off period. So that's where this stuff goes on. I will also say that a friend of mine had a good laugh that this law specifically bans Glock switches, aka those back plates that you can buy on wish.com and other sketchy sites and will literally pop up on your Facebook feed on the, hey, would you like to buy this felony? But they're adding it, and my friend was like, oh, good. It's so good for someone to take action against the scourge of Glock switches because they make a Glock full auto. If only someone would make full auto illegal. And we could also maybe help out with this scourge of gun violence by making violence illegal and maybe violent people make it illegal for them to have guns. If only someone would think of this.
So the full auto switches were already illegal due to NFA 34?
Yes, I believe 34.
It's either 34 or 36. And what I'm getting at is, okay, they're already illegal. This bill makes them doubly illegal. I'm not sure if there's anything in GCA 68 or the Hughes Amendment or whatever that might make them triply illegal.
The Hughes Amendment absolutely does, because it simply says that nobody besides an SOT FFL, and even then, as unfortunately Larry Vickers found out, and some of his compadres, that even that is not a complete carte blanche to own machine guns. But yeah, under the Gun Control Act, no new full autos may be entered into the registry, and so therefore, and you're not allowed to have an unregistered machine gun, and so therefore, if you possess a Glock switch, which in itself, even if you do not own a Glock, is considered a machine gun, then yeah, it's 100% illegal. I mean, the Hughes Amendment doesn't make it more illegal because it doesn't add any additional penalties to it, but it just further states that, yeah, there's no way, no how that you could just say, oh, no, that's fine. I'm jumping through all the right hoops.
So if I thought this had a chance in hell of being passed, I would be very, very upset at this, because as was said, this is AWB 2.0. And it does seem like the gun prohibitionists learned from last time, and they're now learning to prohibit technologies rather than specific models or evil features. But, well, I don't think it's going to pass for several reasons, one of which is, well, I admit that I'm putting some trust in the Republican Party, which I probably shouldn't. But the point being is, the Democrats who sponsored this, the Democrat Party doesn't control both houses. If they did, I would be worried. But they don't. And then there's the fact that I just don't see how this flies in light of last year's Bruin decision. Mm-hmm. So I think this is mainly virtue signaling, because, hey, next year is election year for a lot of people. I don't know if Senator Heinrich is up for re-election, it wouldn't surprise me. But that's what I think this is. So yeah, this could be horrible. It would be horrible if there was a snowball's chance of it passing. I don't think it has a snowball's chance of passing. What do you think, Weer'd?
I don't as well. There's a couple of kind of like interesting little factoids that really all point in one direction. One thing I would like to point out just for this was important for me and I dug it out. Essentially, what this does is it bans the transfer of these firearms. So therefore, if you own one that is banned under this, you are grandfathered in, and you can transfer it essentially to your nuclear family. So husband, wife, son, daughter, or to a domestic partner of any sort. So somebody that is living under the same roof as you. You could transfer these firearms to that, but outside of that, essentially nuclear family group, all transfers are completely illegal. So it really can't transfer out of the family. So therefore, if your family members are not gun nuts like you and have no interest in having a restricted firearm, then the only other option would be for it to be destroyed. Or if there are people that are close friends or things like that, it can't move out of that. But it is grandfathered in with limited transference. It's not a Mr. and Mrs. America turn them all in. Another thing that I absolutely have to bring up as often as I can, just because I am so pleased by it. But Angus King, of course, is from Maine, and I am also from Maine. And the governor of Maine is a Democrat, and very much a Democrat. She is quite liberal by most standards, and I don't say that in any judgmental sort of way. I'm just saying that she is not a. Susan Collins is our other senator, and she is a Republican. Angus King is an independent, and he is not independent at all. He is 100%. Everything he does is aligned with the Democrats. Susan Collins is a Republican, and she is one of those, infamous swing vote Republicans. Her and John McCain were often always talked about when a big bill was coming through, because you never knew which way they were going to vote. Or were they going to side with the Republicans, or were they going to break lines and side with the Democrats? You never know. Janet Mills is someone who overall would side with the Democrats in everything but firearms. Unfortunately, gun bans, the Democrats are the most aggressive about that. And so I'd like that not to be a partisan statement, but at this time it is a partisan statement. But Janet Mills has absolutely nuked gun bans that have come up through the Maine House and Senate. And also in the wake of the shooting in Lewiston, she has definitely been advising for cool heads and looking at the evidence. And so the fact that Angus King is pushing this from Maine, and the fact that even a left-wing governor in Maine is saying, hold your horses, keep your powder dry. Let's make sure, if we're going to be passing gun laws, that they're going to be laws that are actually going to work, and which means that they're not going to be passing any gun laws.
Hey, look, according to Ballotpedia, both Angus King and Martin Heinrich are up for re-election next year.
Oh, brilliant.
Quelle surprise.
Brilliant, Aaron. Thank you so much for looking that up. That is another very interesting factoid that points in the exact same direction. Another interesting fact is that I mentioned the Glock switches. It also has restrictions on bump stocks, which are on that. The battle's not over on bump stocks, but it's only going one direction. Bump stocks are not machine guns and should not be regulated, and people have the right to own them. Furthermore, everything in this law is currently being challenged by federal courts, and it is my prediction that hopefully sometime next year. I don't know enough about the courts to make an absolute prediction on that, but I'm suspecting that sometime next year we may have a battle royale on at least semi-autos and magazine capacities, possibly semi-autos, magazine capacities, and handgun rosters as just a massive combined court case. That's my prediction. And so this law is literally codifying essentially rules that are already very much questionable on their legality. And so that's why if you look in the show notes at the very, very end, I have the Section 242, Title 18 of the U.S. Constitution that talks about the deprivation of rights under the color of law, essentially saying that lawmakers cannot pass laws that deprive people of their God-given rights. And this offense is punishable by a range of imprisonment up to a life term or the death penalty, depending on the circumstances of the crime and the result of injury, if any. And so I'm not going to read the entire text of it, but it is in the show notes. Just to say that, you know what, it might be time for us to dust that one off, because I mean, we're really getting down to, with New York directly defying the court order from NYSERPA v. Bruin, and these laws that are literally being passed and pushed that are directly in violation of the Constitution. And anybody with any amount of sense of reading court stuff, I mean, if you've been to law school, you can read it and understand that no, there's no way and how that this is constitutional. And so, so this is this is nonsense, and this is nonsense that's already on shaky ground. I mean, obviously, I'm not going to completely discount it because, again, this is going on. I think what's more important to know is that this is very much like the Beto O'Rourke quote that I post all the time of "Hell yeah, we're coming for your guns." Is that like this is what they think. This is actually how they feel. They're not joking. Like whether or not this is a virtue signal or not is one thing, but the fact of the matter is these guys would be more than happy, and the backers of it, all the anti-gun groups would be more than happy for something this draconian to be codified into law. And they're more than happy with directly violating the Constitution in the face of pretty open court hearings. So that's, I think, the big takeaway from all of this is that no, it's probably not going to be law, but this isn't the last we've seen of this crap.
Regarding your deprivation of rights under color of law, I have heard of that particular statute of the U.S. Code for easily 10 years now, if not more. Mm-hmm. And it is a favorite canard to be trotted out by pro-gun and pro-Second Amendment folks. And I say trotted out, not to denigrate them or to denigrate this law, but nothing's been done. Mm-hmm. This law has not... I don't know if this law has ever been enforced. I do know that it has not been enforced by people who are trying to circumvent the Bill of Rights. And I guess what I'm getting at is I understand why people share it, but I just don't think there's a point because it's not enforced. It's a dead law.
It absolutely is. I mean, you're not wrong. Like, maybe we could go back to like the Civil War and there might have been enough animosity to use that, but no, certainly not in the sake of the Second Amendment. But I'm just saying it's a tool that it's a mouse tool that we could use later.
Okay.
All right. Well, on that note, we've got one more piece of Aaron's wonderful interview with Annette Evans. And in this one, they talk about the future prospects for On Her Own.
All right, so you mentioned that right now this is just you. Do you have any future plans or maybe just hopes of bringing in more experts, or is this always going to be a passion project just for you?
If I could wave a magic wand and get the right people and have the time and the money and the energy to organize it, this would be a whole bunch of people. Because I'm not an expert on all these areas that I think that we need to survive and thrive. I know a little bit about finance. I know a little bit about, home maintenance. I know a little bit about cars. I'm a little bit about health, a little bit about food, almost nothing about beauty, makeup and clothing and all that, which is all part of surviving and thriving. And I would love to get experts in each one of those areas to be like, well, here's my take on that particular topic. What things you need to know. And, I'd love to see makeup advice that's not, you can make an appointment with a makeup artist and they won't make fun of you, which is basically the extent of my makeup advice.
So I have one final question here, and I apologize if it seems like I'm putting you on the spot. It's not my intent. This is focused very definitely for women. I mean, the name On Her Own. Is this solely for women, or will you accept men and gender non-binary?
Everybody is welcome at On Her Own. I was informed early on in creating this project that I had to have a demographic that I was targeting at. So I halfway took their advice and I targeted it at female and female presenting. However, most of this advice is stuff that's good for people. Doesn't matter who you are. You might notice that some of the content is geared towards my sort of intended audience. That doesn't mean you can't use it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at the front page of my site right now. One of the articles that I posted not long ago to the website in website time about whether or not a gun is a good idea for self-defense and why guns can be a bad idea. The reasons why guns might be a bad idea for self-defense have nothing to do with the gender of the person using the gun. It has much more to do with all sorts of other things that apply to all sorts of other people. So if you're male presenting, non-binary, a dragon, a chicken, I don't care. If you can read or you can watch or listen, you're welcome at On Her Own.
I understand. I get similar questions regarding Operation Blazing Sword. Is this only for queer people? And no, it's not. We will teach anyone, but this is the origin of our organization, and so that is our focus. But yeah, we aren't exclusionary, just like you aren't.
I have a focus. There may be posts where you're going, this makes no sense to me. I would never care about this. I'm like, cool, scroll on, just like the rest of the content on the internet.
So Annette, where can people find you?
So I am best found through my website, which is onherown.life. Or you can go to what is currently my most active channel, which is Facebook. And that's facebook.com/onherownlife, all in one word.
And on the hopeful chance that someone listening wants to volunteer to help you, how would they contact you and say, hey, Annette, I want to be a part of this program. My skills are X, Y, and Z.
So there's two ways for people to help and participate. One is please read the posts, share the posts, talk about the posts, comment on them. That helps raise my profile, and the larger profile I have, the bigger audience I have, the more resources I have to help people out, because unfortunately we are in the world of social media by the numbers and not by the quality of content. And the other thing is you can DM me through the On Her Own Facebook page.
All right, Annette, thank you very much for coming and telling us about On Her Own. I look forward to seeing how it grows in the future.
Thank you so very much. I'm really, really excited about On Her Own, and I can't wait to see it become a bigger and better thing, not just in my work as I improve what I do, but as others contribute to it.
I really do love the scope of On Her Own, and the fact that, like, so often gun nuts are fixated on the guns. Like the joke is, like, when your only tool is a hammer, the entire world looks like a nail. And we mentioned, I'm trying to remember what the original context was. I was just talking about this the other day. A meme popped up where it was one of those like how you think that you're supposed to deal with a carjacker, and it was two guys at a training academy, shooting their rifles to the windshield of the car and all that. How you're actually going to be, how you should actually deal with a carjacking. And it was a guy going down the highway, and and a car in front of him put on the brakes, and he slowed down, and guys got out and started walking towards it, and the dude just floored it and just blew past the guy and took the door off the car and just got the heck away. It's one of those. Yeah. And I when the person posted that, I immediately posted that Doctor Who clip on the "You are in a car."
I'm glad you remembered that.
I mean, it's brilliant. It's one of those, you are in a car. Like, you need to get through a door. Drive the car into the door. It fixes that problem. Guys getting out to carjack you. You are in a car. Run them over or cut him in half between you and the next car. It's going to, you may be carrying a 10 millimeter. The car is going to do more damage. So yeah, the being fixated on the gun and going, I'm going to, pull my gun out and deal with that. It just, all the various aspects of life and how that could pertain to safety and thriving is just a really healthy approach. Because we should have lots of Mousecatools that we can use later. Don't sue us, Disney.
Yeah, it was really great to talk to Annette, and I had fun doing it. I don't know if I'm going to do another interview anytime soon because I felt so awkward.
I mean, you did a great job, and I hope that my carving it up didn't sound too unnatural. But I think I'm pleased with the end results.
Yeah, I think you cutting it up worked just fine.
And I could that's cutting it up was just a minor thing. The fact that you guys had such a great conversation and really talked about such interesting things was the most important part of that. That is the key factor. Well, it is the holiday season, so the next two segments are going to be holiday themed, and at least somewhat. I like to point out that, like, back when I was a PC gamer, every Black Friday was the time of which I would be going through all the different electronic stores and finding out what their Black Friday sales were. And that was the day of the morning of Black Friday was going to the stores and getting good deals on computer parts. And the afternoon of Black Friday was tearing my computer apart and putting new stuff in. And, but there's no reason why that can't pertain to your guns. And Miles gives us a little primer on what you can do to upgrade your firearms.
Hi, this is Miles with another episode of the Southpaw Corner. In this segment, I am going to be talking about upgraded parts for handguns, rifles, shotguns. It doesn't matter really what you should be doing and when. And the first thing I will tell everyone is before you do any upgrades, and I don't care if they're functional or non-functional parts of the firearm, test the firearm first. You don't want to go and put a bunch of parts into a gun and then find out it doesn't work at all. A prime example of this would be a friend of mine had a pair of ordnance in the late 90s that he picked up off a used counter at a gun shop that to the day he got rid of it, never worked properly. And when I say this, it was having issues of stovepiping, misfeeds, double feeds, all kinds. And from what he was able to get from the few people he was able to show it to, is that whoever had it before him had tried to upgrade some of the parts and done a horrific job of it. And they couldn't figure out exactly what was wrong. Now, he could have sent it back to Para Ordnance and probably paid a lot of money because it had all kinds of aftermarket parts in it and got it running again, but he never did that. So, before you do any upgrades, it doesn't matter what it is, do not upgrade until you have fired the weapon first. And with that, there are two categories of upgrades. Functional parts that actually affect the function of the firearm, and then non-functional. And the functional parts are going to be things like triggers, safeties, recoil mitigation systems, and with pistols with slide-mounted optics, the optics themselves, because that extra weight can affect the functionality of the firearm. So I'm going to go over the function upgrades first. So you've gone to the range, you've tested and make sure that you have a functional firearm. And now you want to upgrade parts. And let's say you are upgrading, we'll work with a AR-15 first. And you want to upgrade the trigger. You want to put an ambidextrous safety in, an ambidextrous magazine release, and a different buffer tube, or buffer assembly. Choose one, upgrade it, then test fire it, and then upgrade the next. The only one you don't really need to do this with is the magazine release. Because if you get an ambidextrous magazine release, all it is doing is making it so it functions from both sides of the weapon. And that should not have any functional part on the actual firing of the weapon, unless it doesn't catch right, which at that point you're going to know because it's going to prevent the bolt from going forward all the way because it's catching too high in the well, or it's going to drop out because it's not catching properly. And those are kind of self-explanatory issues. But with the rest of them, one at a time. It doesn't matter which order you do them in, but do them one at a time and function check in between each one. And it doesn't just mean dry fire. It means going to the range and putting a few rounds down range because you put a new trigger in. Well, the trigger spring isn't heavy enough and you get light strikes. Well, if you wait till after you upgrade everything, is that because it's not resetting properly because I screwed up the buffer? Or is the safety not disengaging fully and it's rubbing and causing an issue? You won't know until you start replacing things again to find out what part is actually causing the issue. When it comes to before we go to non-functional things, let's do a pistol. You want to upgrade the trigger, your guide rod and buffer spring, and let's say it's a striker one like a Glock, you want to do the striker spring. Again, and let's put an optic on it as well. I would do the optic last because you may or may not have issues before then. But you do one at a time. You test fire in between until you're done. Because, again, if one thing is not working properly and you replace all of them, now you have to troubleshoot all of them. So if you do one at a time, as soon as it stops working, you know which one is the issue. Now, is it a combination of the two not working together? Possibly. But you know which one caused the issue when you installed it. Now you can go back and say, well, I really want this part, so what other part is causing my issue that I need to upgrade or change out to get to the part that I really needed? The next thing is the non-functional aspect of things, which can be your gas pedals, your flared mag wells, your anodized parts that just make it look cool, your custom grips and forends and stocks. All of those things that don't have a actual function necessarily that you're upgrading. You're just doing it either because it works well or, yes, it has a function on, like a flared magwell has a function of helping you feed your magazine into your grip quicker. Your weighted back straps are lowering the center of gravity of the pistol with the hope that it's going to help mitigate recoil. It's not going to change the function of the firearm. It's just changing how that function of your mechanics function, not the gun's mechanics. So, and the reason why I say wait till after you've made sure it works before you start upgrading these non-functional parts is, let's say you buy a AK-47 pattern rifle and you want to put on your custom Futanari forend with Romanian dog. Do you want to have to take that back off to bring it to the gunsmith to find out why it doesn't function? Or do you want to risk it being damaged or lost when you do? Same thing with any of the parts. It's, yes, you can send it in with those upgraded parts, and maybe it is the upgraded part that's somehow doing some weird thing that's causing the malfunction, but if they're non-functional parts, they shouldn't. So you just want to make sure that it works before you put the parts on. That way, if there is an issue and you need to bring it to a gunsmith, send it back to the manufacturer. Have your buddy who's good with guns look at it. You don't want to risk them being damaged, lost, or not returned. So always test fire before any upgrades. And if you're doing functional upgrades, in between parts that you are upgrading, test fire it to make sure it's still working before you go to the next step. That way, when you get done, you have a dependable working firearm that's going to do the job you want it to do. This has been Southbound Corner with Miles, and I always have fun out there shooting.
I'm sorry, Miles, but what kind of custom forend was that? I don't know if anyone else caught it, but I sure did.
I think I may have missed it, but you know what? We'll just leave it there.
It's one of those things where if you know, you know, and if you don't, it'll go right over your head.
Either way, I'm going to say I was having a really, I was getting a lot of the feels for the talk about that Para-Ord 1911 that didn't really work, because my first 1911 was very clearly someone's project gun. Like it had, I believe, a Kimber recoil recoil plug and guide rod, and definitely it's got a Springfield Armory barrel, but the gun is a Smith & Wesson 1911, and it had a trigger pull that was like heavier than most revolvers.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I don't know how this gun got to be such in a horrible place. I will just be very, very thankful that it was considerably less than what I was expecting to pay to get it to where it is now, which is absolutely gorgeous. Thank you, Greg Durr of Durr Precision Arms. Greg did an absolutely amazing job and pulled out a lot of the crap out of that gun and fixed it up very, very nice. And it is probably one of my better shooting firearms. But
if I remember the story correctly, I believe the trigger pull on this was heavier than that mandated for the New York Police Department with their infamous New York triggers.
We estimate it was somewhere around 12 pounds because Greg put 11 pounds on his trigger pull weight, and he still had to kind of bounce the gun in his hand to get the hammer to drop. But so it was a mess. It was a mess, and furthermore, like the shoe was the trigger shoe was slopping around in the channel. So like, not only could you pull the trigger straight back, but you could also move it up and down too, which is really good for your accuracy. So yeah, this was a project gun by a Shade Tree gunsmith, and my only regret was that I wish that it wasn't my very, very first gun, and I would have realized how messed up it was and maybe asked for a little bit to pay a little bit less for it than I did. I paid what I would say is a fair market value for a fully sorted out gun of that level of used. So, but either way, in the end, it's a whole lot cheaper than what they're going for these days, and I am happy to have it. Also, one thing that I will bring up that pertains very well to you, Aaron Paulette, is if you are in fact modifying and enhancing a gun that has historical provenance, such as a Mosin-Nagant 9130, one thing that is really, really good to do is make sure that you're doing modifications that do not permanently damage or alter the firearm from its historical sense. That way, the true value, in the case of your rifle, if you want a really, really good shooter, you've got one. Plus, you've got any number of parts that you've reviewed for blue collar prepping and for your blog. But also you can still retain that firearm's historical value, which is really where they're shining these days.
Mm-hmm. Well, to be completely blunt, I'm not really worried about the historical nature of my Mosin, because the Soviet Union made millions of them. Mm-hmm. And to the best of my knowledge, this thing didn't see action. It's more a case of, I like to tinker, but I'm also a purist. And so it makes me happy knowing that I can reverse them at any time. But I do it to make myself happy, not to make other people happy, because honestly, other people are just mad that I changed it to begin with. So, it's your gun. Do what you like with it, but be mindful of history.
Yeah, and that is another reason why I like to bring that up. And this is not the first time I've talked about this on the show. Is that again if you could just you've got a synthetic stock on the gun, and you've got that muzzle brake on it, and other things like that. Like if you could just put that stuff, just take all that stuff off and put the original stuff back on, and you're none the wiser. Like, don't give somebody else a hard time for that stuff. Yes, Aaron, if you had cut down the barrel or cut down the stock or drilled drilled holes in the receiver for scope rings or that sort of thing. Yeah, I get it. Okay, that would be that's defacing the gun and all of that. And again, it's your gun, do what you want. I mean, I think we've all watched, various YouTubers blowing up, various inexpensive guns, just for laughs and for content and all of that. And it's one of those, like, yeah, if you've got a high point and you want to, you want to fill it with concrete and see if you can blow it up by overloading the ammunition into it. Matt and Heinrich from Geeks, Gadgets and Guns, started doing dangerously hot ammunition loads into their 9mm high point in expecting to blow it up. And they did blow up an AR-15, and they weren't successful at blowing up the high point. So that's something to say about that. And they did destroy an AR-15 by loading 300 blackout into it. And I would argue that, it was a fairly junky AR-15 that they had, and they had, really had stripped anything of value off of it before they blew it up. And it was a very, very brilliant and valuable video on the dangers of don't accidentally load a 300 blackout into your 5.56 rifle just because you wouldn't think it can chamber. It absolutely can chamber, and it absolutely can fire. And if you end up doing those two things together, you will not be happy if you pull the trigger. But at the same time, when it comes to a gun that does have a historical provenance, I can see having a little bit more of a cringe factor on that. But at the same time, it's your gun. Do what you want. And furthermore, double check to make sure that they didn't do any damage on it. Aaron's still got the stock for the rifle. You've still got did you put an upgraded trigger in it?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So you still got the garbage trigger somewhere.
Oh, yes.
So yeah, it can be returned to a bone stock 9130 and then sold for a lot more than what we paid for them, but it's still not a ton of money.
I don't know what our 9130 is going for these days.
I think they're over $200, but not much more. So.
Oh, hey, I might get back what I paid for it.
So
I was Well, I mean, I was younger, and I didn't really know how much most of the guns should go for. So yeah, I think I paid like $210 or something for mine way back in 2010. And oh hey, it looks like they're selling for over 300 these days.
Okay, I mean, this is the prices. Like, I'm just astounded on the. I mean, I've got a pair of 9130s in my safe that I paid $70 a whack for.
Mm-hmm.
Now, granted, that was distributor direct. So yeah, they just that was on my FFL, and they just mailed them right to my house. So that's a little bit of a discount, but yeah, they but. I've gotten them all very, very cheap until I've suddenly started getting into the more rarefied, M1891s that I won't say how much I paid for them, but I'm happy to have them.
It was a learning experience.
Yes, teachable moment. I mean, I just said that I paid way too much for my for my first 1911. So you know what, it all happens, and better than that, than getting stuck up in some of these like crazy expensive things. Like there's I think there's some stories about some like people keep trying to say that they're going to bring back the Merwin and Holbert revolver. And like people have been putting in like thousands of dollars to pre-order them, and then they just kind of up and disappear, and the money may or may not come back. So yeah, there is that. So that also happened a little bit with the Remington, with the
R51?
The R51. I'm like, R91? What's the number? But yeah, with some people they gave the option, we'll do a direct trade for a Remington 1911, or we could take the gun back and do the work and do the update on it and get it back. And they did get it back, but it was like well over a year. It might have even been 2 years before they got their gun back. And so for a while there, we were just like, did they just take their money? So there are teachable moments, and there are some that hurt more than others.
Yeah, I do think that overpaying for a gun is practically a rite of passage for gun owners.
No lowballers. I know what I got.
Actually, that sentiment reminds me of something I saw recently on social media, and I don't have it in front of me, so I'll have to paraphrase. But it is a screenshot of a conversation on eBay, and the recipient is the seller, and apparently a bidder contacted him. I assume it's a him. Yeah, it's a him. And says something like, hey, I am a collector of sewing machines, and the one that you have, that your starting price is something like $1,300. It's worth maybe 80 or 90. I just wanted you to know this, and if you could tell me how you came to this conclusion, I'd really like to know. Thanks. And the response was, oh, yeah, hey, happy to tell you. The answer is really simple. My wife wants me to get rid of it, and I don't. And she doesn't know how much I paid for it. So I am deliberately inflating the price past what anyone will be willing to pay, so that I can then tell her, yeah, honey, I've got it on eBay, and no one's buying. And so I wonder if the no lowballers, I know what I got crowd, at least some of those are doing something similar, where their spouses are saying, you got to get rid of these, and they're saying, fine, I will put such a ridiculous price on these that they won't sell, and on the off chance they do, I get a lot of money.
I mean, for those that listen to the ACP blooper reels, you will hear that very frequently after the show ends, especially the ACP film tracks, immediately Oddball will start opening up Gunbroker and just browsing and finding things to show us. And of course, Oddball is the king trash panda, so he will find, guns with police evidence tape on them, guns that are in just like a bag of parts, guns that are rusty, guns that are of very, very poor repute. But he'll also find guns that are not that special with absolutely astounding prices on them. And yeah, he always comes to the conclusion of someone was told by a spouse that they need to sell a gun. And so they are saying, oh yeah, this bone stock Glock 19, I'll sell it for $3,000. If someone wants to buy it for $3,000, I'll be more than happy to sell it to them, but I don't want to sell it. So guess what? I'm going to give it to a price that no one wants to bite at.
Funny enough, because you mentioned Trash Panda guns, and I think I mentioned this in the channel privately, but not as part of the show. When I was at the Liberal Gun Club convention last month, and I was talking to Annette, I asked her what she thought of the Altor, and she'd never heard of it. And I went, oh my God, the Altor is the most $100 gun you will ever buy. And she had this gleeful look of, tell me more. And I'm not certain, but I'm pretty sure I convinced her to buy one and review it. And I look forward to just the hijinks that will ensue. I mean, I don't know if it'll be better if she hates it or if she loves it, but I think that maybe she'll appreciate it for being what it is, which is a $100 gun that's basically a modern Liberator. But regardless, I think that her review is going to be hilarious.
I think the best way to describe the Altor to someone who's never seen it is to go to their website and find there is an embedded YouTube video on their website on how to use the Altor. And the owner of the company and designer of the gun is standing out in the southwestern desert somewhere. And he reaches down to his belt where there is a one-size-fits-all nylon garbage holster. He draws the Altor, takes it off of whatever the safety section or whatever the stuff he's got on, points it at a silhouette target that can't be more than like 8 feet away, touches off the one round that gun holds, and misses it cleanly. Oh, it is something special. I want one so bad. Oh, I mentioned the battle royale that might take down the handgun safety rosters. Yeah, the moment I can buy guns that normal people can, like people are going to be thinking, "Oh, is he going to buy some amazing stuff?" No, he's going to buy some trash. Why have one really, really nice gun when I can have 16 absolutely horrendous ones?
Well, if you ever wanted to do a more modern version of the pirate brace of muskets, the Altor is where you would start.
A brace of high points.
All right, one more segment to go. Let's try and maintain till we get this done.
The finish line is in sight, Aaron. Pull up.
Stay out of the weeds. By the time this episode airs, Hanukkah will have already started, so David is here to tell us, Goyim, a little bit about this ancient holiday, along with a new development called Project Menorah.
Hi, and welcome to Gun Lovers and Other Strangers. This is another installment in my holiday series. In this segment, I'd like to talk about Hanukkah and Project Menorah. Following the October 7th attacks by Hamas in southern Israel, several non-Jewish friends reached out to me regarding the propriety of their displaying and lighting a Hanukkah menorah to show solidarity with the Jewish community. Personally, I have no problem with this and was very touched by their interest in making such a visible show of support. Several weeks later, I started seeing posts about Project Menorah popping up on various social media platforms. The first part of their post states, Project Menorah is a grassroots movement encouraging non-Jews to place a menorah, along with their other seasonal decorations, in their windows this December in fellowship with Jewish friends and neighbors who might otherwise not feel safe to do so due to the rise in anti-Semitism. Considering how alone many of us have felt in recent weeks, seeing millions of people worldwide protesting and demonstrating in favor of a group who has, as part of their charter, the destruction of Israel and the extermination of the Jews, this idea was welcome. For those who choose to participate, the following part of the post is obviously optional, and I can see how it might make people uncomfortable. OPSEC after all. Participants are asked to share photos of their Hanukkah decorations on social media with the hashtags OnlyLoveLivesHere and Project Menorah. However, this is not as easy as simply buying a menorah and lighting a few candles. This is a Jewish tradition, which means rules. As I've said before, Judaism is a debating society that formed a religion. The story of Hanukkah starts back around 170 BC. King Antiochus IV of Syria sent an army of conquest to Jerusalem, which was triumphant. After the war, the Syrians desecrated the temple and Antiochus banned the practice of Judaism, outlawing Shabbat and our other holidays and festivals. Altars and idols were set up throughout the temple for Greek gods. Antiochus offered us two choices: convert or die. Later that year, a resistance movement led by a Jewish priest, Matthias Maccabee, was formed. Judah Maccabee, Matthias' son, was the military leader and in a remarkable feat led the outnumbered and poorly equipped Jewish soldiers to victory over the Syrians. After the temple was liberated, one of the first things we did was rekindle the 7-branched eternal light above the ark where the Torah had been kept. This lamp was only to be used with special sanctified oil, of which only a single day's supply could be found. It would take 8 days for more oil to be brought to the temple. Miraculously, the single day's worth of oil burned continuously for the full 8 days. We've celebrated this miracle ever since. From a technical standpoint, menorah simply means lamp. However, the special 7-branched menorah isn't to be lit outside a temple, and in recognition of the miracle of Hanukkah, a special menorah with 8 main branches and a 9th for lighting the others was created. This is what most people know as a menorah, though its proper name is Hanukkah. For those who choose to participate in lighting a menorah, there are, as I mentioned, rules. The lighting of the menorah occurs after sundown except on Friday night where they are lit before sunset. Candles are placed in the menorah from right to left, with the last candle placed in the leftmost holder. However, candles are lit from left to right using the 9th candle, which is called the shamash. Once the candles are placed, a prayer is recited while lighting the shamash, then using that to light the remaining candles. The shamash is then placed in its holder, and the candles are allowed to burn down uninterrupted. There are numerous English translations of the Hanukkah prayer. This is the one I learned as a child, the first part in Hebrew, the second in English. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lahadlik ner shel Hanukkah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, sha'asa nisim la'avotenu bayamim hahem b'zman hazeh. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who has sanctified us with his commandments and commanded us to light the Hanukkah lights. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who performed miracles for our ancestors in those days at this time. Another Hanukkah tradition is eating fried foods. Potato latkes, also called pancakes, and jelly donuts are common choices. From deep in my heart, a most sincere thank you to all those who offered us support in recent weeks. You can't know how much it's meant to us. Chag Yurim Sameach, Happy Festival of Lights.
I have a little dreidel, I made it out of wood, and when y'all are ready, I'll play you if I could.
That about wraps up this segment. If you have any questions for me or suggestions for future segments or a comment on a past segment, please post them on the Assorted Calibers Podcast Facebook or MeWe pages, and Aaron or Weer'd will make sure I see them. I'm also a contributor on the Blue Collar Prepping blog, which can be found at bluecollarprepping.blogspot.com. Finally, I'm a published author, and books with my stories can be found on Amazon under the names Brena Bock and David Bock. That's all for now. Thanks for listening. I'm David, and this is Gun Lovers and Other Strangers.
This was a really, really good segment because it's a beautiful expression as a sign of solidarity to the Jews. Because I mean, there's so much hatred being shown up everywhere and all that. Like, I mean, David's been talking about it a lot with us on just kind of how stressful this time has been for him, and it's understandable. And so it's good to give people the opportunity as a way to show solidarity, but also make sure that we're doing it the right way, because it kind of goes against the spirit of it being a kind gesture to be handling this holy holiday improperly. And it's an excuse to eat fried food. that is both appropriate since it's the holiday about oil, but it's one of those like, oh, it's nice. I like fried food.
I mean, we're Americans. Do we really need an excuse?
No, we're not. And you're a Southern American.
Exactly.
Us Yankees, we occasionally fry food. you rebels, you occasionally don't fry them.
Although I will have to say, based on my experience, that the Scottish have us beat, because I think the Scots will deep fry anything, including candy bars.
Pizza. They deep fry pizza. Yeah, no, you're right. Oh, deep fried candy bars. Oh, I had a Milky Way bar deep fried at the Topsfield Fair here in Massachusetts, and it was a sublime, decadent dessert experience. Because the key is you freeze the candy bar with a stick in it, and then you dip the frozen candy bar into essentially pancake batter, and then huck it into the deep fryer, and so once the breading becomes crisp, the outer chocolate shell is pretty much completely melted, but again held inside the crispy fried shell. And then as you're biting into the candy bar, it goes from gooey and hot gooey liquid to cool to this is what a regular candy bar is to still a little bit frozen in the middle. And oh, it's wonderful. And again, I find the texture of a Milky Way bar to be the absolute perfect one. A lot of people do Snickers. I think the peanuts throw it all off. Milky Way, maybe Three Musketeers. Those are the candy bars you deep fry.
Okay. I believe the Scots like to deep fry Mars bars.
I think a Mars bar is a Milky Way. I think that
it's not.
It's not? Okay.
I don't know. Maybe? No. Okay. A Mars bar has almonds in it.
Gotcha.
And a Milky Way doesn't. A Milky Way just has the nougat. Mars bar has the nougat and toasted almonds, and then it looks like there's a caramel coating on top.
Yes.
Yeah.
Essentially, for Americans, the almond Snickers are essentially just an Americanification of the Mars bar.
Maybe.
And it has the trademark
Snickers...
veins on the top. If you know, you know.
I'm trying to remember if Snickers has the caramel on top or not.
It does.
Okay.
You know what else has the caramel on top?
You know, of all the segues, that one's better than the one I thought you were going to do. Because I thought you were going to mention about, you know who else has the trademark veins? And the answer to both of those questions is our listeners.
Yes. You know it's true. You guys are wonderful like candy bars, and thank you so much for listening to this show. We really appreciate it. It's wonderful. But we do have to give a very special thanks to all our supporters on Patreon. They really keep the lights on. And to become a Patreon patron, go to patreon.com/Assorted Calibers podcast to sign up. Patrons get an early release of the podcast, plus bonus content like the hilarious blooper reels, which we have referenced many times here, the ACP film tracks, and the ACP Mag Dump.
Also, please remember to rate us on Apple Podcasts, subscribe to us on the platform of your choice, and share the show with your friends, both online and off.
I got a blog. It's called Weer'dWorld.com. That's WEERD World.com. And you can hear me weekly on Handgun Radio on the Firearms Radio Network.
And you can get more from me at Linktree/Aaron Paulette. That's linktree.ee/Aaron Paulette, all one word.
And this music you listen to, it's by Nate Spencer. I think it's pretty good.
So in the words of Adam Sandler, on this lovely, lovely Hanukkah, Weer'd will drink his gin and tonica.
And you can also smoke your marijuana.
If you really, really wanna. Unfortunately, rum doesn't rhyme with Hanukkah. Vodka does, but I'm not really a vodka drinker.
Drinking vodka is like watching pornography when you could be having sex.
And so is our podcast. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Arr!